Got my brother's B18 non-VTEC here. I'm going to be building it for him. Just tore the motor down last night. There's everything from the oil pan to the alternator. This is going to be a pretty simple build here. We're going to do nippon turbo pistons, the scat rods, ARP headstuds, BLOX dual valve springs. That's the main gist of the build. We're going to be doing the Devcon sleeve reinforcement, and that's pretty much going to be it. The goal is about 450 horsepower for this. Got the head right here. It's just drying off after running it through the parts washer real quick. So it might be hard to see on the camera, but the cylinder walls, I got them all scuffed up here. For the most part, these ones were really dirty, so they cleaned up pretty damn good. Try to show you on the walls there. I used just a screwdriver with some sandpaper over it. I don't know what grit this is. It's pretty low, probably like 100. Something real rough to grit everything up real good in there so the Devcon grabs on nice. I got the motor about as level as it's gonna get on this engine stand. I got some old disc brakes sitting in the feet to raise the backside up to level out the middle. The sides, I just loosened up all the bolts and adjust the block and retightened everything. This will come back down once the head gets put on for the Devcon to harden up. See, if I push on that, it kind of centers out. So hopefully with the head, that'll be it'll be, you know, as good as it needs to be. Alright, so I'm going to be using painter's tape to tape up the deck surface and then cut out the cooling jacket, so that way you don't get any salt or Devcon into anywhere we don't want it. Got the block all taped up here. About to pour the salt in, and you can see how grody this was. So I'm going to stuff a rag in here to stop the salt from coming out, and I'm going to fill the salt basically right up to the top of the output of the water pump right there. Alright, so I got the water jacket filled with a combination of sugar and salt because I ran out of salt, so I had to finish it up with sugar. So both of them should work, because you just gotta make sure it all gets washed out after. This is what I used for checking the height. I just marked that with some tape right at the right where it sits at the top of the water pump output. So I'm pretty much dead on there all the way around. So I'll be mixing up the Devcon and pouring it in. So for the Devcon, I'm going to add the hardener to the resin. Just going to pour it right into here. I'm going to mix it up with the flathead. When it's all mixed, get it into the bag, and then cut a really tiny hole in the corner and use it to squirt it in around the cooling jacket. So I got the Devcon all mixed up here in the bag. I'm going to cut a small incision at the tip and then go squirt it into the block. Alright, so pretty much used that whole bag up, and the Devcon is basically right where I wanted it, just about a 1/4 inch right before the top of the block there. The motor's a little tilted, so it's going to be a bigger gap on this side until the head gets on, but I'm going to pull off all the tape. I got the old head gasket right there. I'm gonna clamp the head on and then let this dry. Alright, just got the ARP studs in. Got the old head gasket right there. About to put it on the head. Put the head on and tighten her down. Alright, so I got the head torque done. And yeah, basically just let this sit and wait for the Devcon to dry. I'm going to give it a day or two. If you're really trying to go the extra mile at this part, you could bolt on the crank girdle, the crank main holders, but I just decided to skip it. And if you were going to do that, you'd want to do that before you begin pouring the Devcon, because once you add the salt and pour the Devcon, you don't really want to be moving the block around too much. Just took the head off here. Here's how the Devcon came out. Pretty good for the most part. It's got a few spots where there was some air bubbles at the surface, but for the most part pretty good. I'm pretty sure what happened was towards the end there was some air in the plastic bag and I had a really small opening, so it was kind of like spewing out towards the end, so that might have been my fault there, but I'm not worried about it. So I got it all marked up with the head gasket. Just used a center punch, and we're going to drill the holes. I'm going to retape up everything just so there's less cleanup after, and we're doing a small hole and then a bigger hole, and we're going to be keeping the hole as close to the outside of the block as possible, so to keep full support on the cylinder sleeve. Okay, we got all the holes drilled here. See how they're offset to the outside as much as possible. It's also winter out now. We had probably the worst thing that could happen when you're doing this is the drill bit went through and then snapped off in one of these holes here, and we had to go in with a special type drill bit and drill that out, but that's all taken care of now. The main thing was just being careful not to crack the Devcon, because then you'd probably have to try to Dremel it all out and re-pour it. It should just be a big nightmare and waste of time. But all figured out now. Got it outside. I got the hose. I got the freeze plug out. Probably hard to see. I can unplug this hole now for the first time. And there's, yep, see all the salt in there. So I'm just going to be hosing it out the best I can. And then we're going to get this thing in the parts washer, because this block is filthy. got the block soaking here. I scrubbed it down a little bit. It's hard to see with the lighting here. But this thing is just super, super dirty, so it's going to need a few passes in here probably. And you can just see how caked on a lot of that grime is. I'm just going to clean it as best I can. Try to do a real good job on the front, since that's what you actually see when it's out in the car. Once it's off here though, I'm gonna hone the bores out, and then throw it back in here, clean up the bores and the oil passages and everything. Just hone the block here. It's gonna go into the parts washer one more time, and then it'll be ready for final assembly. Alright, got the block here with the fresh hone. Try to get that as good as I can. Nice 45-degree crosshatch. Getting ready to put the rings in and set the ring gaps. I got the nippon pistons right here. I'm just breaking the wrist pins loose. They come, I noticed that these generally are pretty stuck in there, so I'll show you guys how I break those free and have them all loosened up. Alright, this one's a perfect example to show you guys. I already did this one, and you see it's the wrapper right there. So these things are generally pretty tight. I could try with two hands, but that still ain't gonna move, so I'm gonna use a socket. This is a 14, and I'm gonna go on this side. Since it's already recessed, I'm gonna punch it through, and then just, coat the whole thing with Marvel, and then reinsert it, and then it should be fine. And just very carefully. Just try to tap that out. I got that one about halfway out there. And even still, it doesn't want to spin or nothing. So use the marble cap here. Just fill it up. They give you holes. Just try to pour it into the hole there. You can pour the rest right into the sleeve. And then same with the other side. I actually probably should have did this a little bit beforehand to help it coming out, but not a problem. I'm going to start tapping this back in. Alright, you guys can see it's just about to fall out of the side of the piston there. So you just want to just coat it. Just coat it in marble or whatever your lubricant of choice is. Like many things in life, you can never have too much lube. This one is particularly tight, I will say. But it's starting to be able to, there we go. Starting to be moved by hand. This one is really tight. But as you can see, I just put it all the way back in with just by hand, and it just popped out on the other side there. And I'm just gonna add a little more on that side right there, and then that should be all set. So just don't be alarmed if your wrist pins feel like they're seized up or something. They just need a proper lubrication, and everything will be good. Yeah, there it goes. Now you can hear that. Now it just slides back and forth absolutely free. And you saw how stuck this one was just a minute ago. Now I can get it all the way out and in with just barely any pressure. See? Yep. Lube up your wrist pins. Alright, so I'm getting the rings all out here. Get ready to set the gap. So I've spoken with Unira on eBay, who's the only official seller of the Nippon products. And they used to ship these pistons with Hastings rings, and they were having problems with cracked pistons because the Hastings rings were more designed for forged pistons rather than cast. So these are custom rings specifically for these pistons. And the ring gaps are, for the first ring, are pretty standard, but for the second ring, the gap is supposed to be between 0.035 and 0.040, which is basically double OEM spec, which kind of alarmed me at first when you put the gap in and it's twice as big as you would expect out of the box. But I've confirmed with them, and that is correct, and that solves the piston cracking issue. And just to clarify, so they have these all nice and labored. These are the oil control rings. Second compression ring, first compression ring. And your first ring goes right in the top. Second compression ring, and the oil rings right there. So it may be confusing if you've never dealt with these before, as the second rings say top on them. But that's just to actually identify the top of the ring, as they'll usually have an N or a top or some sort of marking if the ring goes, which is the top side of the ring itself, but not the actual ring position on the piston. Some rings, if they don't have any markings, then generally those are the type that are designed to go in facing either direction. So I'm going to open the second rings first and set them in the bores, as it's the ring that goes further down in the block than the top ring. So I'll show you guys how I like to put the rings in. I don't know if I'll be able to do this with one hand here, but I like to close the gap as close as I can, and then start with the side with the gap, as this has the sharp corners, and then get that going in there, kind of like so, and then work the edges down, and then look at that, it's in. Alright, then once you got all the rings in, you're going to want to use one of your pistons and just set it in the bore, and this will give it this will shore the ring up, so that way it's sitting on a flat surface. And I like to push these in right until the bottom of the skirt hits the top of the sleeve there, pretty much just like that. And then I'm going to go put the same thing with the top, the first rings, and I'm going to set those to about right there. Is where I like to go. And then I'm going to come in with the feeler gauges and see where I'm at, and see if I got to take any material away. Alright, so I'm checking the ring gaps here, and the bottom gaps are all they're all good. This is the .035 gauge, and got some bad lighting, but it just slips right through on all of these here. I already went through and did the top ones. I got one coming in at 0.018, which is the tight end of spec for these, but I'm really looking for like 0.019, 0.020. So these rings are going to have to be gapped. Alright, so I got all the rings gapped here. The bottoms didn't need to get touched, and you're looking for 0.035 to 0.038 per nippon spec. And for the tops, I set these just a thou over the loose limit, because this motor is for my brother and I know how he drives, so definitely want to be on the looser side. So I'm setting these to 0.021. It just barely fits in there. There it goes. But yeah, 0.021. Got the scat rods in the parts washer getting cleaned off as per their instructions, and they even want you to clean the bolts off and everything, so I'm just going to do what it says. So I'm going to be getting ready to put these rings on the pistons, then put the rods on the pistons, and put the pistons and rods into the block. Alright, so I got all the pistons marked, so I'll be putting the rings on from the corresponding bores. I got my little tool right there, got the oil control there, and I'm just going to follow the instructions on the packaging to the T, and get all these rings on here. Alright, this is how I get the rings on here. Start with the oil control and find the butt end, and I'm just lining everything up with itself, and then I'm going to set the where the actual gaps are going to go after. So I put that on, flip it upside down, go for a oil control ring, and then where's my, okay, yep, there's my gap. So just start from the bottom of the piston here, and just slide it down as even as possible. And then I like to do the top one first, so I'll open the gap and get it above there, and then flip it upside down, and then drop the control ring into place. Alright, that's in. And make sure everything moves nice and loose, nothing's binding up. And then the same dealio for the lower one here. The main thing is you want to pull on the gaps so you don't let because these have the sharp edges, so those is what will actually scratch the piston if you're really worried about that. And then this one just pops right in, and there you go. So I got the butt and the two gaps right there, and like I said, these will get clocked. I like to clock them right before I install, so that way I know they're clocked exactly how I want. And if you're going to clock them now and then you have to double check them anyway, then why not just save the time. So the piston goes up. Got my rings from the bores. This is number 3. So you start with the lower compression ring. Get it in the tool. Open her up and slide her down. Okay. And then just slide it into the groove there. Make sure it's nice and loose, no binding up. And the top one, same thing. Get it in the tool, open it, slide it down, and there you go. Well, that's all the rings right there. And then, like I said, I'm going to orientate the gaps before I put them into the block. So now these just need, I just got to get the rods out of the parts washer and put the rods on the pistons. Alright, so this is how I deal with these spiral locks. So you're just going to take them and stretch them out. Be careful not to cut your fingers. Get it all opened up like that. Take your piston. I like to see which way the wrist pin likes to slide out easier. One side usually is easier than the other. In this case it's this side for this piston. Pops out easy that side. This way it will pop out, but not as easy, so I do this side first. There's a groove in there. You're just going to take it and start with the end and start just working it in, spinning it, and then once it won't spin anymore, push it in as much as you can. Then when you can't push it in anymore, you're going to take this and then pull it in on itself to close the gap, and do that while pushing, and then it'll slide in. So I'm going to just start working it into the groove there, and it's getting to about there. Then I'm going to push it into the groove. Okay, and then I can't push it anymore, so then I'm going to take this, I'm going to spin it in on itself while pushing down. And that got it there, and then just push it in the rest of the way, and just double check to make sure it's seated fully, and that's a spiral lock installed. So I'm going to push the wrist pin out the side, and these are all nice and easy to push since I lubricated them all up earlier. And now you want to locate your exhaust side. Take your rod, make sure you have your cap matching. The tangs always go to each other, and the tangs always go on the exhaust side. So just double check you're on the exhaust side. I like to put some Marvel right up in the cap there, right in the wrist pin area. Spin it around so it just gets everywhere, and then just put in the piston, and then slide the pin back in, and just like that. So now the rod's on the piston, tangs on the exhaust side, and then you just install the last spiral lock. And I use these tools if I have trouble with the spiral locks. It's just a pinpoint and then a half cut pinpoint to get an edge. These are more useful for removing spiral locks rather than installing, because taking these off is a lot more of a pain in the ass than putting them on. So again, same with the other side, you just open it up and then work it into the groove the same way. Just spin it until it doesn't want to spin anymore. Then start pushing it in by hand. You usually get to about this side right here, and then it won't want to go anymore. Then spin it in on itself while pushing down. It will pop in the rest of the way, and and then just finish it off by hand. And there you go, installed, just like that. And I already did all the other ones, so these are ready to be installed into the block. I'm just going to clean it down with some brake parts cleaner, make sure there's nothing on the bores, and then lubricate everything up with a little WD-40, and then pop them in with the ring compressor. So this is how I set the ring gaps on these. Feel free to not follow this if you don't like this, but I like the first one there, and then 90 degrees off, and the oil control pinch right about there, with the top being 45 off and the bottom being 45 off. So I'm using the ARP ring compressor. I really like this thing. So you just drop it in very carefully. Press it in just enough so you have the edge of the sleeve sticking out. Carefully drop it down into the bore. And then just take a rubber hammer and gently tap it in. Just like that. So you would just repeat that. Get all the pistons installed. The crankshaft and the main caps, pickup tube, and the windage tray. I'll get in a nice bath before I install them and plastic gauge everything and install the new bearings. Make sure all the oil clearances are all good. Now I'm getting ready to install the bearings here. Just take I like to take a rag and spray some brake parts cleaner in it and just carefully dab all the surfaces here the bearings are going to sit on, and making sure not to get any of the rag fibers in any of the oil holes or anything. I just want to show you guys how I like to install bearings. It seems to work pretty good. So I start with the I always start with the tang side and use the tang to locate it. This is a lot harder to do with one hand, but I'll get it lined up just like that, and I'll hold the top there so the bearing can't go up, and then I'll squeeze it with the other side and push down, and it'll just slide right into place. These ones it's not as important, but if you have a coated bearings, the surfaces are very easy to scratch them off, so you want to get that squeeze right so that way you're not cutting it with the edge of the main here. And this applies for the rod bearings as well. Just line them up with the tangs and plop them in. Alright, so I got all the bearing caps in place, laid in the plastic gauge, and I just dry assembled everything, and it's all torqued up. Now I'm about to untorque it all, take it all apart, and check the oil clearances. Alright, just got the main caps and the rod caps off here, and I already gauged everything up. The rod caps were a bit stuck on there, so I had to kind of tap them out a bit, which definitely crushed the plastic gauge a bit more than normal. So I kind of had to gauge off of where it got smushed out, and like this one you can really see how it had the it had the solid part of it on this freaking camera. And then you can see where it kind of got all like that looks like how it was, but then right there you can see how it got all smushed out from having to tap the caps off. Here's all the measurements right here. Rods, mains, and that's the spec going for, with the limits on the side there. I wasn't going to ghetto polish the crank, because if it's if it's good how it is, you'd rather not touch it. But now that I've been working a lot more intimately with the crank, and that's been totally cleaned off in the parts washer, there is like especially on this one, there's a big groove right there. I can feel it with my my finger. It's probably not coming up on camera, but I'm gonna hit these with the old sandpaper shoelace trick, and should clean the journals up and just buy me ever so slightly more oil clearance. Alright, so just got the whole bottom end here assembled. Pretty much just cleaned all the plasti gauge off with the parts washer fluid. Used a very liberal amount of Lucas heavy duty oil stabilizer and a bit of Marvel mystery oil through the where the oil filter would go, and just followed all the instructions. On the main caps it's 2 steps up to 56 foot-pounds. On the scat rods it's 2 steps up to 50 foot-pounds, and thing spins like butter here. So this is gonna be this is definitely gonna work. In the middle of doing the head here, using the HPT tool, I got these 4 done. Still got about 12 to go. Using the BLOX dual valve springs for LS, B18, B20, and just got a socket, 10 mil, rubber hammer, and the most important part of this, a magnet. Because the last thing you want to do is lose one of these damn keepers. Alright, got the copper spray. About to go spray the head gasket. Alright, got the head gasket sprayed here and hanging to dry a little bit. I got the ARP head studs all in the block, and I just got to finish up with the last few valve springs in the head. Run the head through the parts washer one last time, and then the head will be going on. I also got to do the rear main seal and the oil pump here, and as well as the water pump. Alright, got the block here all ready to go. Got the head studs on deck. Got the head here all cleaned up, ready to go on. Head gasket all copper sprayed and ready to go. So we just torqued the head onto the block here. We got the heater set up. We're going to heat it on both sides evenly to try to get it up to temp. Let it all cool down and then re-torque the head studs. Alright, let the head cool down overnight. Retorqued everything 80 foot-pounds, and about to get it ready for the cams, everything else for up there. Still waiting on the seal for the water pump and the oil pump pickup tube and the O-ring seal. Alright, so the camera's about to die here, but I got one of the cams all torqued down, 86 inch-pounds. Just got to put the caps on the exhaust cam, torque them down, and that's pretty much it. The head will be complete, except for got to set the valve lash on the rockers. Got the rest of the caps cleaning up right there. So she's almost done. The seals for the oil pump showed up. Got the ultra gray right here, the bolts. About to get this all ready to go and installed onto the block here. Alright, got the oil pump on, all torqued up. I just gotta wipe away the excess permatex that's squeezing out there. I got the wood train pickup tube all cleaned and ready to go, so I'm going to be getting to that next.
Today, which flower would you be? The red rose or the black?
Alright, got the new water pump and the timing belt all on here, and it's all in time. Everything's all good. Set the valve lash, 0.004 on the intake, 0.007 on the exhaust. I added the BLOX breather plugs, so I just gotta get the intake manifold on and the timing cover and button her all up. So the camera died yesterday, but we've been hustling. Got all this all together. Pretty much ready to go in. Then we'll be tuning. Got the motor pretty much ready to go here. Just needs the intercooler piping. And got to fill her up with oil, spark plugs, and we'll be doing the first start.